Can you just walk us through some of the key elements of what you're trying to achieve?
Well, actually what we're trying to achieve is to let people know, that is the media, the regulators, the airlines, and of course the passengers, let them appreciate what airports do to make that journey as effortless and as pleasant as possible. We all know that there are problems, within the passenger journey. There are disruptions to the passenger journey. The passengers don't often appreciate or understand who does what in an airport. At an airport, there's so many different employers, and so having that journey be seamless is a real art that airport managers have to master. There's so many pieces to the processes. There's so many processes between the time the passenger starts the journey at the airport to the time they get on the plane, and then the reverse. So this initiative is twofold. One, to try to explain what airports already do and how much airports actually care about the passenger. I mean, most airports these days see the passenger as their main customer. And so they feel as strongly about that passenger as the airline does, and in a lot of cases these days, they care a lot more about that passenger than even the airline carrying the passenger does. The second is to help guide airports into what the passengers really care about, and how can they make that process better for them? How can they help the passenger get through that airport the way that passenger wants to get through that airport? So a lot of airports are already doing it. Some airports are struggling to get there, and some airports really need the guidance on how to get there. But if you look at what's already happening, we have a program that we call the Airport Service Quality Program, which is a survey. It's a standard survey that we give to passengers all around the world, which allows us to then benchmark and compare airports, and allows airports to compare themselves against themselves before. How are they doing compared to what they were doing before, and allows them to compare themselves to other airports of like kind, in the same region, the same size, however that airport wants to compare itself to competing airports. And it tells us not only what the passengers think of the airport, just sort of in general, it's good, bad, indifferent, but it also says for that airport, the passengers that use that airport care the most about certain things. We have
some huge learnings for the airport itself.
Huge learnings for the airport. What do they care about? Work on the things they most care about. It's not necessarily what you care about or what you think they care about. This way you know exactly what matters in their airport experience. Now, there's a lot of commonalities around the world. I mean, cleanliness, is, and especially cleanliness of the restrooms, is important everywhere in the world. So that's a true bottom line for the airport. You've got to keep that airport clean. You've got to keep those restrooms clean, which can be a challenge, especially in airports where the growth has been quick, has been fast, where the facilities are undersized, where the washroom facilities are undersized. You have changing demographics. You have more women traveling than used to. And so, I certainly see it when I go around the world, that you have a lot of airports where the ladies' rooms are oversubscribed. Very difficult to keep washrooms clean when they're overused. So it tells airports where they are now, tells them what they have to work on, and where they have to go. And airports, we have, I say most of the airports now, certainly almost all of the large airports, most of the medium-sized airports, and a few of the small airports subscribe to this service so that they can keep track of what's happening with their passengers. And to do it, they have to work with all of the other players, if you will, role players on the airport platform. The federal governments, with immigration, customs, security. Sometimes that's supplied by the government, sometimes that's done by the airport itself, sometimes it's done by other contractors. It varies around the world. But whoever does it, the airport has to stay in touch with and try to influence the behavior of all the people that come in contact with the passenger.
I want to get back to the initiative, because what you're talking about is absolutely spot on, because it is about trying to appreciate the behaviour and respond to the behaviour of the passengers, actually give them what they need and what they want.
Exactly.
One of the issues, I guess, is that, as you said earlier, airports do operate at different speeds. And I need to ask the question as whether or not what tools you're going to provide to help kind of get your measure and understanding of how airports should behave out there in the marketplace.
Right, is to get the data to the airports. I mean, the airports that are already part of the airport service quality, they have a pretty good idea of what they need to do or what they're doing right and what they're doing wrong. But for the other airports, particularly smaller airports that don't necessarily subscribe or don't have that capability, is to give them guidelines like Wi-Fi. You have to supply Wi-Fi these days. It doesn't have to be free, but you have to supply it. It becomes very important when the passenger's journey is disrupted, especially at airports that have some of the low-cost carriers that have very little presence at the airport. So when something goes wrong, there's nobody for the passenger to deal with. So they've got to get online. So that means you have to at least have access to an amount of bandwidth, because when this happens, it's happening to a lot of people. So you have to have at least backup bandwidth for when the passenger journey is disrupted. As I say, it doesn't have to be free. We're not insisting that it be free. It's nice that it's free, but it's almost more important that it be, one, accessible, and two, fast enough or with enough bandwidth that it's usable in a disruption.
How can you measure the success that you have for those airports that are new subscribers to the idea?
Oh, with the airport or from the airport?
From the airport.
From the airport. They can do surveys, even whether they subscribe to ours or not. That's the best way. I mean, there's nothing better than asking your passenger. And we are about to come out with a kind of a reduced service or a kind of modified program for the very small airports on some of those, smaller but very key elements that they need to look at.
Because amongst the smaller airports, their culture isn't to research their marketplace because they can't actually afford the research.
That's right. So what we're looking to do is a very low cost model for doing that. If it has to be subsidized, it has to be subsidized. But I think it's important enough because the passengers from those airports go to other airports. So I mean, they're as valuable as the passenger at a 50 million passenger airport. So, I mean, they're all valuable to us.
One thing you touched on earlier about sort of communicating this out there, and it's not just in a business-to-business environment, you actually want to take it into a broader media context.
Exactly.
How much of a campaign are you going to adopt?
What we're going to do is we first target kind of the international regulator stage, and that's at the International Civil Aviation Organization. They're having their triennial assembly in Montreal in September and October. So we're going to launch the campaign there to let the regulator know that airports care about the passenger, and that airports basically put the passenger first, and to show, to demonstrate what the airports are in fact already doing. The airport service quality is just one thing. The airports are spending billions of dollars in capital facilities to make that journey as seamless as possible. Just the fact of having wide lobbies for security processing, for immigration processing, for customs processing, for baggage processing, that costs a lot of money. I mean, that's a lot of space to use, but that's what helps these processes go faster, because otherwise you have these funnels. So you have people coming in, and then you funnel them through these narrow corridors. Well, if you make the corridors wider, and if you staff it, then the whole process goes a lot more quickly.
Much more of a welcome as well.
It's much more of a welcome. You can get through in 5 minutes versus getting through in 30 minutes. It has nothing to do sometimes with the staff or how efficient they are. It's the space. There's some airports, some of the older airports that were built before some of these processes, and they just physically cannot get you through that fast, no matter how many people they try to put through, because the space isn't there.
Well, a lot of them are dealing with old infrastructure as well. I mean, they're trying to make good. The problem is when they do spend money on developing the total airport experience, it's not always best communicated to their own passengers. I mean, airports don't actually spend money investing in communicating what they've achieved.
And that's why we need to do this, because, airports, as you say, they just don't do that. They are very focused on getting it right, and then they go on to the next thing to get it right. They're not focused on getting it right, then marketing that they got it right. Yeah. So, we're just kind of shy and retiring folks, and so.
Well, there's an air of conservatism about it, for sure, but actually I'm really pleased to see that you're adopting a robust approach, and I wish you every success.
Thank you.